Australia's only LNP, or Liberal National Party majority government, the state government in Queensland of Premier David Crisafulli, has rolled out a new definition of what a woman is, sort of. A woman is an adult female human being, the state's Minister for Women, Fiona Simpson, said last week when answering a question asked of her in Parliament. The definition of the previous Labor government was much more, shall we say, modern and progressive, or should I say regressive, perhaps. Their bureaucrats defined woman to mean all people who identify as a woman or a girl. The question came from the Katter's Australian Party state leader, Robbie Katter, and he also asked directly if the minister and her department consider transgender people as women. The LNP minister didn't answer that bit, but said only that a transgender person was, quote, someone whose gender identity is opposite to the sex the person was born with. The precedent set in our only conservative-leaning state affects all Australians. This week, the Premier himself, David Crisafulli, also dodged the specifics of that second question. The Australian newspaper reports Premier Crisafulli also refused to clarify whether the new definition of a woman being an adult female human being includes transgender women or not. It probably does, because all states and territories let people self-identify their gender now. Even Queensland dropped the need for a person to have had surgical gender reassignment before being allowed to just change their sex on their birth certificate and driver's licence. The reason the politicians are avoiding the question is not just that it's a political minefield, but also a legal minefield. This stuff impacts how governments spend your tax dollars. The Queensland government has a program that dishes out $20 million for women's career grants, for example, whatever they are. More importantly, Queensland has a Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence Minister, Amanda Cam, and she told Parliament that in order to protect women, you need to know how to define a woman. Hear, hear. Our panel this week is former LNP Queensland Premier Campbell Newman and the National Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Australia, the fast-growing alternative non-left-wing teachers union, Ed Schuller. Campbell, welcome. Good to have you here.
G'day.
Ed, good to see you too, mate. Campbell, you've got to be glad that you were Premier of Queensland in simpler times when, we pretty much knew.
How far we've come in 10 years, hey?
Yeah.
So what an enlightened state we are.
What an enlightened culture we've become in the Western world.
Damien, look, this is a nonsense when it comes to Queensland particularly, because Queensland is a blue-collar conservative state. And I can tell you right now, across the vast majority of Queenslanders, they're very clear what a woman is. And it's only the inner city elites in the 4 or 5 kilometres around the GPO of Brisbane where the smart Alex live, the opinion leaders live, the loud voices live, the leaders of the judiciary and the media and, politics, etc. Apart from those locations, men and women across Queensland know what a woman is.
Yeah. It's and I think people are pretty open-minded and
that's a different issue.
Totally.
People are very live and let live. They don't, they understand that everyone's got a right to live their life the way they want to live it. But when these things get pushed onto them, for example, that you must acknowledge the pronouns of people who are at the risk of censure, then that's too much. And so I don't know why David Crisafulli sort of squibbed it. It was a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, well,
they sort of got there, but they didn't. They ran away back to the doghouse.
Yeah, I'll answer that first question, but not that second one. No, that's right. Ed, this has got to be having an impact on teachers and the classroom today, because one of the things that I get really annoyed about is, whilst we should be accepting, perhaps we should be tolerant even, we certainly shouldn't be promoting this radical left-wing, because it is radical left-wing neo-Marxist theory. It's gender ideology. It's modern gender theory, and it's invading the classrooms.
Yeah, it's all over the classrooms, not just in Queensland. Obviously, Victoria is long gone. There's a lot of issues down there. Specifically in Victoria, children are allowed to socially transition without parental knowledge whatsoever. And that's got a bit of media traction recently, but that's again a matter of, okay, who's parenting the children here? Is it the government or is it parents? But in Queensland as well, we've surveyed our members Australia-wide, but we've got a large contingent in Queensland, and 91% of them said there's no place for transgender ideology in the classroom. And I think another part of it is 85% said, no, you can't actually become a member of the opposite sex. And I think that gets to the core of the issue. And I think and I don't know if we might disagree on this, but I think where conservatives have sort of ceded the ground on this issue as well is sort of saying, oh, well, it's only really a matter of informed consent for children. You know, if it's, when you turn 18, you can obviously make decisions for yourself like you can in any walk of life, which is true. But if it's true if it can be true for an 18-year-old to change their sex, then the natural progression of that will be prepubescent kids. Okay, we'll stop the sex. If you can actually be born in the wrong body, they're going to bring that forward. So I think conservatives probably need to be a little bit stronger on this one and say, no, it's not true of all ages. It's not an unloving or a hateful thing to say that. Love doesn't rejoice in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. And I think that's sort of what we need to get back to on this matter. You can't change your sex. It's just a reality. And we need to have compassion with the people who think that they can. But particularly for kids, I mean, there's just no room. No room for that at all.
Absolutely no room for it, and it is really infuriating that we are doing what we're doing to kids. And on that note, we all know very well that gender ideology is dangerous stuff because it leads to kids undergoing chemical and surgical treatments who in some cases may not require them, and without the proper unbiased psychological assessments and support also, as numerous inquiries around the world have actually shown us. And all of that led the Queensland LNP government to put a freeze on puberty blockers for under 18s. On Tuesday this week, the Supreme Court in Brisbane overturned that freeze on the grounds that it was brought in without adequate consultation with health professionals. But just hours later, and not to be overruled, the Health Minister, Tim Nicholls, took the People's Chamber's power into his hands and issued a new ministerial directive to reinforce the ban, overriding the court ruling, as he has the right to do. Now, this ban didn't come out of nowhere. It followed public outrage after the news that a state-run gender clinic in Queensland had treated almost 40 children without parental consent. Yep, you heard me. Let that sink in for a minute. A state-run gender clinic had treated almost 40 children without parental consent. That's the way Labor likes it. The state controls your kids, not the parents. Parents are yucky and mean, and the state is kind and loving. Remember that. Health Minister Tim Nicholls said, we owe it to children to ensure that care is grounded on solid evidence and we act with caution. Campbell Newman, Tim Nicholls is on the right track here.
Oh, absolutely. And so again, it's this case of, where the LNP are going on this issue. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But on this one, Nicholls is really doing exactly what needs to be done. And as you have said, children are the children of their parents. They are not the children of the state. And I think a really good thing that the LNP could do would be to really put a stake in the ground and reaffirm that principle, because it extends across a variety of issues today where, we have seen across the nation legislation that seeks to sort of undermine the role of parents. And, I think that's one of the things, again, in a blue-collar conservative state, parents would normally expect that, they're the ones in charge of the upbringing of their children. They would be probably surprised to see how it's been undermined in various ways over the years.
Well, it's a subtle, but it's a very Marxist thing, right? To sort of say the state is in control.
It's something. It's like out of any of these books that once upon a time we used to study, which taught us about dystopia. Brave New World. 1980. Where there was no concept about parents at all. Or 1984, where the young scouts, or whatever they were busy dobbing in their parents for thought crimes.
Yeah. On the far left and on the far right, you've got the Nazis infiltrating the children with the Hitler Youth, and all authoritarian regimes have done this. And it's like, here's this subtle sort of elimination of parental authority and parental power. It's a bit like parents not being able to get access to information about their children's mental health.
Well, the state should only be stepping in. I'm sure Ed would agree if there's a clear-cut case that the parents are not fit to be bringing up their kids. And that comes down to abuse about, not getting them to school, not making sure they've got 3 meals a day, being dressed, etc., and sheltered. That's a different issue. But that line gets pushed all the time by bureaucrats and stupid, gutless politicians of both political persuasions, or left and the right, are foolish enough to actually, sort of go along with some of this stuff.
I don't want to praise the Minister Tim Nicholls in Queensland, the Health Minister, too much, because he's the guy who hasn't reinstated Dr. Gillian Anderson, who we had on this show, who was a psychiatrist who stood up against this ideology in the department and got fired. And the LNP government came in, they still haven't reappointed her.
Yeah, and for your viewers as well, she was fired after she was invited to attend and speak at a forum about that very topic. And she said, look, it should be evidence-based. We're not so sure that it is at the moment. And she's been stood down and the minister hasn't acted on it. And the government hasn't really been inclined to act on it, which is completely worrying. Like you said, sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And again, it just means that Conservatives have really struggled to stand on any principle, on any conviction here.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. And maybe it is a matter of, there's a level of political convenience in talking about, stopping these puberty blockers. Obviously, it's the right thing to do. But why won't they just say the truth? Why won't the Premier, when he's asked that question, say, no, that's a transgender man is not a woman, a male that...
Well, look, if we walk the streets of Ingham, where David Christofouli grew up, and we talked to friends from those years ago, from his upbringing, the families around, I'm sure that they would be quite indignant that he was unable to answer that question. They'd be going, David, you've lost the plot.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned child protection as well, just quickly. You mentioned child protection, what it used to be. Now it has sort of become, you're taking the child's rights away if you stop them from being able to do this. This is what the trans rights groups are saying. It's like, no, it is protecting these children. They do need to have some level of informed consent. But how is it protecting
and at least
children?
The psychologists, which they didn't even get. They weren't even getting proper psychological care.
Exactly.
In the Tavistock hearing that in the UK, which is the treatment methodology that the Queensland ones are based on, I think, or the Cairns one was based on.
But can you imagine that as a parenting tactic, just affirming, like anything that your child says or does, that's your tactic, that's the way that you love them. It's just to affirm.
Actually, you're Superman. Go jump off the roof.
Exactly. But that's not even good for the kids. It might be good. It might feel good in the short term, and it's a sort of cozy relationship that a lot of parents want to have, where they're just friends with their children, and there's not really a level of respect there. I think it's increasingly worrying because the government is the vehicle at which this parental setup is happening. And that's sort of what.
And by the way, the inconsistencies of the left in their view of the world, come out in this issue, just like in so many other things. It's like, it's so kids under 18 can sort of be allowed to, in their worldview, to be able to be prescribed puberty blockers and go through a transition, etc. But drive a car. You get 100 hours up, and it's got to be surveyed. You got to be tracked, and it's got to be documented. I mean, come on. I mean, they're all over the shop. They're sort of. One could argue under their regime, it's easier to go and get. It has been easier to go and get puberty blockers at the age of 15 than many other things in life. Exactly.
Right. Hold that thought about conviction. I think that point you made about conviction of the right, of the Conservatives and even libertarians and centre right and values are at the core of what we're going to talk about next. We're going to come back and have a look at where the Conservative political realm is in Australia at the moment. A great way to support the other side is to support our sponsors like SmartKits Australia, the best supplier of do-it-yourself prefab home renovation kits. And it's not just carports. SmartKits do decks, patios and pergolas, flyover roofs and insulated roofing too. All prefabricated, fully engineered and delivered anywhere in Australia. And if you're not too handy, they'll install it for you too. Get onto it. smartkits.com.au. That was a segment clip from our weekly Friday night news show, The Other Side, which you can watch in full by simply going to YouTube and searching up The Other Side Australia. Then you'll find our full shows playlist. You can also find all of our full shows and our segments on our own website. othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Help us build a whole new Aussie media by joining us over there and signing up for the exclusive side.